Graham, good to see you, and thanks for having us here today.
My pleasure.
Really good to see you. Just want to talk about your career and how you got into illustration and how this incredible career kind of kicked off for you.
1960s is when Doctor Who first started, and there was an immediate affinity with stuff that was very strange and strange creatures. And probably so that's the nearest thing to horror I think I can remember. When you first start out as an illustrator, you have a folio work and you just take it around to anybody that you think might be interested in. I wanted to do film posters, so you'd go through Universal, Fox, MGM, all the big names, and you just go through the telephone directory, ring up the company, and then try to get through to somebody. Ask for an art director or whatever, and quite often they'd say, well, actually, we don't actually commission posters, but this agency does. So you go to that agency, and that's the way it worked.
So you hustled?
Yes. Well, there was no internet then. There was no mobile phone or anything. I had to go to this. Didn't even have a phone in the flat. I had to go to the telephone box at the end of the street, and with a directory there, and just keep putting coins in, and with a list of people to call that day, and that's what you would do.
Evil Dead must have been a big turning point in your career. How did you come across Palace Pictures and get the gig?
A random place I'd been told had sprung up, Palace Pictures, and I knew they were distributing unusual sort of counterculture stuff, and they were looking for somebody to do a poster, and of course they, being a new company, weren't really well versed in how to commission stuff. So in a way it was quite easy for them just to see somebody come in with almost the poster built in, that they could see my work was exactly right for the film. So yeah, just luck.
That 80s period, was that the kind of glory period for this sort of stuff with like Evil Dead and the video nasties?
Probably the gory period. The important thing about the 80s is it was the era in which VHS came into its own, so it's the beginning of home entertainment. That's when there was a huge sort of mushrooming of all these titles. I mean, just a lot of crap films that came out, and the idea was if you sold them on the cover, then that was fine, you'd make some money.
As you know, I'm a big horror fan, and when I was like 8, 9 years old, me and my brother had your legendary Nightmare on Elm Street poster in our bedroom. It was amazing, like having your poster in my room as a kid, and then so many years later you were doing the poster for my feature film. Does that happen often? Do you get people approach you like that? Or?
Yeah, I do.
Of course you do.
Yeah, it's interesting that people are so influenced by things as children, and of course you take that with you into adult life, and for somebody who then goes on to be a filmmaker, they obviously will always reference stuff that really had an impact on their formative years. So it's quite natural that should happen anyway. Though I mean, I do get asked to do posters for people who literally just will cite those video shop days.
What was it that wanted you to kind of jump on board and do the Brash Young Turks poster?
You talked about the process of filmmaking and involving people and giving people sort of a step as such, and that's really what clinched it for me, though. That actually, if you could help other people in the business, then that's always going to be something I'll try and do. Take
us through the process of how you put together the Brash Young Turks poster.
I think that because it was so character-led, that obviously there were certain people that had to be in there, and it's all about building up what the relationship between those characters is. There's kind of a sweep as well through the sort of the good to the bad, and there is a sort of an overall kind of shape. It's always really good to see a strong female lead, and I think that it's quite often missing from poster work. I mean, often women are just objectified as sex objects, and that's a tradition which goes way back, and it's almost become a parody in many ways. But I thought, it's great to have somebody who is vulnerable and yet somehow gets empowered, and so it's really about her. And actually, I thought it was quite good just to push back the male characters. In fact, the only other very prominent male character as such is really the villain at the top, and I've just covered in blood red, and he's just very much the devil, I guess. The film, I think, is it's beautifully shot and beautifully lit, and the colours were really, it's the first thing that jumped out for me, was that the use of lighting, the colours, it had a palette which was quite fresh, and obviously being a very youthful film anyway, though, I wanted to make sure those were in the poster, so there had to be an element of primary. So some very strong blues, very strong yellows, very strong reds.
You seemed surprised when I approached you with Brash Young Turks.
Yeah.
I remember that time you were almost seemed a little bit stunned, like, oh, that's a bit unusual. Yeah. How come?
Well, only because it seemed to be the last kind of project where you'd probably want to use illustration. And I did think also, if you were going to use an illustrator, then why wouldn't you be going to somebody who, you know, probably is more versed in the sort of graffiti generation, shall we say.
Have you done any posters that have been like really gruesome or really violent or really out there where, you know, marketing people or whoever they are have told you, tone down that, G?
Famously, the poster for Nightmare on Elm Street 2, which has the Freddy character over a school bus, the poster was used outside Leicester Square in the cinema, and they removed the word school bus from the bus and they painted out the knives on Freddy's hands, leaving you with this bloke in a jumper kind of wiggling his hands around over this kind of random yellow vehicle. I worked on the poster for Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, which was a very sort of splattery film,
wow.
very comedic splattery film.
That just took it to another level, didn't it?
It did, yes. It did a sort of an Evil Dead, I guess, to many extents. But there's a scene with a sort of, I think it's a lawnmower or a rotor blade,
towards the end.
And everything's just covered in blood. It's just this really intensely gory picture. So that was the poster, and it had to be submitted to London Transport because the main advertising arena such was going to be on London Transport on the Underground. And of course they just took one look and said, no bloody way, literally.
Tell us what you're up to. I know that you've got your catalogue coming out, which I'm really excited to see, and you've got a gallery showing coming up as well, yeah. Which is very exciting. And
well,
it's like a celebration.
It's an opportunity that arose through an odd set of circumstances, but people have asked, especially over the last few years, you know, how come there's no book with your work in? A chance arose to actually do a book and have an exhibition to promote the book, but also to actually show some of these original pieces of artwork. So it's a gallery published book, limited to just 500 copies. So that makes it a little bit more expensive, but it's coming in a big box with a limited edition print, all signed and numbered as well, though. And really, it charts the history. For me, what's interesting is that it goes from the Evil Dead through to stuff I'm doing now, and it is really a sort of a history of home entertainment. If I look at the past work, I think the poster for Nightmare on Elm Street is still one of my favourites. Nightmare on Elm Street 2, particularly as well, I'm very happy with.
Graham, it's been a real pleasure to see you.
And a pleasure as well.
And thank you for coming on board doing the Brash Young Turks poster. For me, as I say, that was like a dream come true. Really great working with you, you're a top man.
Well, thank you. And cut.